you know? Sometimes you just stop and think, where is me? It's a weird question, but it pops up. You feel like you're right here in your head looking out, like there's a little captain in the control room steering the ship. And for a long time, people sort of thought that way. They figured there must be one spot in the brain where all the magic happens, where your consciousness lives, where your unique sense of self resides. It feels intuitive, right? Like you have a core, a central point where you are. But science, it has a way of making simple things incredibly complicated. And when we start looking at the brain, this idea of a single, fixed spot for yourself, it just doesn't hold up. It's a lot messier than that. And honestly, it's a lot more fascinating too. For centuries, smart people tried to pin down this elusive self. Back in the day, before we had fancy brain scanners, it was all speculation. Some thought the heart was the seat of the soul. Then, as we learned more about the brain, the focus shifted there. Think of Rene Descartes, that famous philosopher. He famously pointed to the pineal gland, a tiny little structure deep in the brain, as a place where the immaterial soul interacted with the physical body. He thought it was the grand central station for consciousness, and it made a certain kind of sense at the time. It was small, it was central, it was unique. It felt like a good candidate for the seat of the soul. Even later in the 1800s, there was this idea called phrenology. People believed you could tell a lot about a person's character and abilities by feeling the bumps on their head. The idea was that different parts of the brain were responsible for different traits like generosity or combativeness, and that these parts would grow bigger if you used them a lot, causing bumps on the skull. It was completely wrong, but it showed a persistent belief that specific mental functions could be neatly localized in distinct brain regions. It was an early attempt to map the brain, even if the map was totally fictional. But the more we learn, the more we see that the brain isn't like a collection of separate little boxes, each doing its own thing. It's not like there's a self box and a memory box and a feeling box. No, it's much more like a massive interconnected city. Imagine a city where every building, every street, every electrical wire is constantly talking to every other part. A thought, a feeling, an action. It's not happening in one building, it's happening across many buildings, many streets, many wires all at once. The brain is a network, an incredibly complex one, and your sense of self, that feeling of you, well, it seems to emerge from the dance of all these parts working together. It's like the city lights at night. You can't point to one bulb and say, that's the city. The city is the whole spread of light. To even begin to talk about where the self is, we first have to figure out what we even mean by self. Because it's not just one thing, is it? It's a bunch of different feelings and experiences bundled together. And when you start to pull it apart, you see that different aspects of what makes you likely involve different parts of the brain, or more accurately, different combinations of brain activity. Let's think about the most basic part of yourself. This is your minimal or basic self. It's the feeling of having a body, being located in space, and experiencing things right now. It's that raw, immediate sense of being alive and present. You feel your clothes on your skin, the floor under your feet, the subtle rumbling of your stomach. You know where your hand is, even if you close your eyes. This isn't some deep philosophical concept. It's just your physical presence in the world. Where does that come from? A lot of it starts with your senses and how your brain processes them. The somatosensory cortex, for instance, is a strip of brain that processes touch, temperature, pain, and proprioception, which is your body's sense of where its parts are in space. If you close your eyes and someone touches your arm, you know exactly where that touch is because of this area. It builds a kind of map of your body. And then there's interoception, which is the sense of your body's internal state. Your heartbeat, your breathing, that feeling of hunger or fullness, a bladder signal. This constant stream of internal information tells you how you're doing physically. The insula, a small region tucked deep inside your brain, is a key player here. It integrates these internal body signals with emotions and external sensations, giving you a fundamental sense of what it feels like to be you, right here, right now. It's about monitoring the gut feelings, the deep, primitive sensations that ground you in your physical being. Without this basic sense, it would be hard to feel like you exist at all. It's the anchor. But you are more than just a body in space. You have a story, you have memories, hopes, fears, plans. This is your narrative or autobiographical self. It's the story you tell yourself about who you are, how you got here, and where you're going. It's your personality, your values, your past experiences that shape your present reactions. This is the you that develops over time, the you that remembers your first day of school or what you had for breakfast yesterday. It's a continuous, evolving narrative. This narrative self is a huge, complex undertaking for the brain. It involves many different areas working together. The hippocampus, for example, is essential for forming new memories, especially those linked to specific events and places. It helps you remember what you did last summer or the details of a significant conversation. Without a functioning hippocampus, you might live in a perpetual present, unable to add new chapters to your life story. Then there's the prefrontal cortex, the front part of your brain right behind your forehead. This area is like the executive suite. It's involved in planning, decision making, personality expression, and social behavior. It helps you make sense of your past, imagine your future, and organize your thoughts into a coherent story. It's crucial for your sense of who you are as a unique individual with specific goals and traits. When people talk about someone changing their personality, like after a brain injury, it often involves damage to this very important region. Think of Phineas Gage, the railroad worker who had a metal rod shoot through his head in the 1800s. He survived, but his personality changed drastically. He was no longer the responsible, well-mannered man he once was. His core memories were intact, but his narrative self shifted because his prefrontal cortex was damaged. The temporal lobes, particularly parts involved in semantic memory, your general knowledge about the world, concepts, words, and facial recognition, also contribute to this narrative self. Recognizing faces, including your own, understanding language, recalling facts, and plus, these all play into your sense of identity and how you interact with your personal history. Your ability to call up facts about yourself, like your name, your birthday, your favorite color, these are all part of your narrative self. Then there's your social self. This is how you see yourself in relation to others. It's about your reputation, your social roles, parent, friend, colleague, your self-esteem, and your understanding of what others think of you. Humans are social creatures, and a huge part of who we are is shaped by our interactions and our place in the group. The brain areas involved in social cognition, like the medial prefrontal cortex. Another part of the prefrontal cortex, but more towards the middle, are key here. This area is highly active when you're thinking about yourself, but also when you're thinking about other people and their intentions, beliefs, and feelings, what scientists call theory of mind. It helps you navigate the complex social world, to understand what's appropriate, to feel empathy, and to manage your self-presentation. Mirror neuron systems also play a role. These neurons fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing the same action. They're thought to be important for understanding and imitating others, for empathy, and for learning social behaviors. They help us connect with others and internalize social norms, which then feeds back into our sense of who we are as social beings. Your self-image is built, in part, on how you perceive others perceiving you. It's a constant feedback loop. And what about agency? That feeling that you are the one making choices, initiating actions, being in control. When you decide to pick up a cup of coffee, you feel like you freely made that choice. That's agency. It's the feeling of being the author of your own actions. This sense of agency involves parts of the brain that plan and execute movements, like the premotor cortex and the supplementary motor area, which are involved in preparing movements. The parietal cortex also plays a role in linking your intentions to your actions and understanding the consequences of those actions. When you plan a movement, these areas hum with activity, anticipating the outcome. The feeling of, I did that or I chose that, emerges from the smooth integration of intention, planning, and execution. If there's a mismatch, like in certain neurological conditions where people feel their movements are controlled by someone else, that sense of agency can be profoundly disturbed. It shows how delicate and constructed this feeling is. Finally, there's your emotional self. This is your capacity to feel, to experience joy, sadness, anger, fear, love, your moods, your emotional responses to situations, your overall emotional temperament. These are central to who you are. We often define ourselves by our emotional lives. I'm an emotional person, or I tend to be calm. The limbic system, an older, more primitive part of the brain, is crucial for emotions. It includes structures like the amygdala, which is involved in processing fear and other strong emotions, and the cingulate cortex, which plays a role in emotional processing and learning. The insula, mentioned earlier for interoception, is also deeply involved in emotional awareness. It connects internal bodily sensations with subjective feelings, and again, the prefrontal cortex comes into play, especially its role in regulating emotions. It helps you control impulses, think through emotional responses, and manage how you express your feelings. It helps you decide whether to act on anger or to take a deep breath. So while raw emotions might originate in deeper brain structures, your emotional self, as a mature, nuanced part of your identity, relies heavily on the higher level control and integration provided by the prefrontal cortex. It's the difference between feeling fear and understanding why you feel fear and choosing how to respond to it. So, when we break down the self into these different aspects, the basic body and space self, the storytelling narrative self, the social self, the agentic self, the emotional self, we start to see that it's not just one thing. And because it's not one thing, it can't possibly be located in one single neat spot in the brain. Instead, each of these selves involves a whole orchestra of brain regions, all playing their instruments together, sometimes overlapping, sometimes taking the lead. This brings us to a more modern understanding of the brain that operates through networks. Not isolated parts, but interconnected systems that fire together. Think of those different aspects of self we just talked about. They don't exist in isolation. Your basic bodily feelings influence your emotions. Your memories shape your social interactions, your plans for the future affect your current actions. It's all intertwined. One of the most talked about networks when it comes to the self is the default mode network, or DMN. It's a group of brain regions that tends to be active when you're not focused on the outside world, when your mind is wandering, daydreaming, or reflecting. It's highly active when you're thinking about your past, planning for your future, or just generally thinking about yourself and other people. It's involved in self-referential thought, introspection, and memory retrieval. When you're just sitting there, letting your mind wander, that's your DMN lighting up. Many scientists believe it plays a crucial role in constructing and maintaining your narrative self. It helps you keep your personal story going, even when you're not actively focused on it. But the DMN doesn't work alone. It interacts with other networks, like the salience network, which helps decide what's important to pay attention to, both internally and externally. And it interacts with the executive control network, which helps you focus on specific tasks and make decisions. These networks are constantly communicating, influencing each other, and dynamically shifting their activity based on what you're doing or thinking. The idea here is that your sense of self isn't a fixed point or a single module. It's an emergent property. Think of it like a beautiful, complex melody. No single note is the melody. No single instrument is the melody. The melody emerges from the combination of all the notes, played by all the instruments, in a specific sequence and harmony. Yourself is like that melody, emerging from the synchronized activity and interaction of countless neurons across various brain networks. It's not in one place, it is the process itself, and this becomes even clearer when we look at what happens when parts of the brain are damaged. If the self were in one spot, then damaging that spot would simply erase the self. But that's not what happens. Instead, we see specific aspects of the self being altered or lost, while other parts remain intact. Take a stroke, for example. Depending on where it occurs, a person might lose the ability to speak, or to recognize faces, or to move one side of their body. Their narrative self might be affected if their memory is impaired. Their basic self might be affected if they lose sensation in a limb. But the core feeling of, I'm still me, often persists, even if me has changed dramatically. They are still an individual with hopes and feelings, even if their abilities are severely limited. This shows that while specific functions might be localized, the overall sense of self is distributed and resilient. It's not a single point of failure. Consider conditions like Alzheimer's disease. As the disease progresses, people often lose their memories, their sense of who they are in terms of their personal history, their narrative self. They might not remember their children's names or their own past. It's incredibly sad to witness. But often, a core, basic self remains. They might still experience emotions, recognize basic sensations, and have a rudimentary awareness of being present. They might still enjoy music or a gentle touch. This heartbreaking situation shows a gradual erosion of the narrative self, while some fragments of the more basic self persist for longer. It's not a complete obliteration of self all at once. The self isn't just distributed, it's also incredibly dynamic. It's not set in stone the moment you're born. It changes, adapts, and evolves throughout your life. Think about it. The you at 5 years old is very different from the you at 15, and profoundly different from the you at 50. Your brain, and therefore yourself, is constantly being sculpted by your experiences. This is all thanks to something called brain plasticity. It's the brain's amazing ability to reorganize itself, to form new connections, and to strengthen or weaken existing ones based on what you learn, what you experience, and what you do. Every new skill you acquire, every new relationship you form, every challenge you overcome, these all leave their mark on your brain, and in turn, on your sense of self. Trauma can profoundly alter the self. A traumatic event can rewire brain pathways related to fear, memory, and emotional regulation, leading to a changed sense of who one is in the world. Aging also changes the self. While some cognitive functions might decline, wisdom and new perspectives can emerge. Our values, our priorities, our very personality can shift over the decades. It's not just a physical aging process, it's a constant renegotiation of who we are. There are also fascinating conditions and experiences that really highlight how fluid and constructed the self can be. Think about depersonalization or derealization, for instance. These are conditions where people feel detached from their own body, their thoughts, or even reality itself. They might say, I feel like I'm watching myself from outside, or the world doesn't feel real. This isn't just a metaphor, it's a profound disturbance in the basic sense of self and its connection to the world. It shows how easily that integrated feeling can break down. And then there's schizophrenia, a severe mental illness where a person's sense of self boundaries can become very blurred. They might have delusions of being controlled by external forces, or feel that their thoughts aren't their own. This points to a disruption in that sense of agency and self-ownership. The very distinction between me and not me can become confusing. Even more common experiences like out-of-body experiences, where people feel like they're floating above their body and looking down, offer clues. These often involve disturbances in the temporoparietal junction, an area that integrates sensory information from the body with information about spatial location. When this integration goes awry, the brain can create the feeling that I am somewhere other than my body. It's like the brain's internal map gets temporarily scrambled. And what about practices like deep meditation? Many meditators report experiences of ego dissolution, where the usual sense of a separate, distinct self seems to fade away. They might feel a profound connection to everything or a sense of boundless awareness. While these are usually temporary states, they demonstrate that the self isn't an unbreakable, immutable thing. It can be altered, shifted, and even temporarily dissolved through specific mental practices. It shows that the self is very much a creation of brain processes that can be influenced and changed. So, if the self is not one spot, and it's constantly changing, what about the idea that it's only in the brain? This is another interesting twist. While the brain is undeniably central to generating our sense of self, many scientists and philosophers argue that the self isn't confined to just the skull. Think about the extended mind theory. This idea suggests that our cognitive processes, and by extension, parts of ourself, can extend beyond the boundaries of our brain and body. For example, if you rely heavily on your smartphone for remembering appointments, contacts, or navigation, is that phone, in a way, becoming part of your extended memory system? If you're a carpenter, and you can feel the properties of the wood through your tools, are those tools becoming an extension of your body's sensory system? It's a provocative idea, but it highlights that our interactions with the world and the tools we use deeply shape how we think and act, and thus who we are. And what about the body itself? We talked about the basic self being rooted in bodily sensations. A brain in a jar, no matter how perfectly preserved, wouldn't have yourself. Your self is deeply intertwined with your physical body, with its unique history of experiences, its scars, its strengths, its weaknesses. The way your body moves, breathes, feels, and interacts with the environment is fundamental to your sense of being. Your gut feelings, your posture, your facial expressions, these are all part of yourself, and they are inherently embodied. The brain constantly receives feedback from the body, and this loop is crucial for maintaining a coherent sense of who you are. The brain isn't working in isolation. It's continually processing information from and about the body. Even the environment plays a role. Our culture, our language, our upbringing, the people we interact with, these are all external factors that shape our brains and, consequently, ourselves. We don't develop in a vacuum. A child raised in one culture will develop a different sense of self, different values, different ways of thinking and feeling than a child raised in another. Our self is not just biological, it's profoundly sociocultural. So, the location of the self isn't just internal, it's also distributed across our interactions with the world. After all this talk about different kinds of selves, distributed networks, and constant change, it might feel a bit disjointed. But here's the most amazing part. Despite all this complexity and fragmentation, you still feel like one coherent person. You don't feel like a bunch of separate brain networks running around. You feel like you. This is one of the biggest mysteries in neuroscience and philosophy, often called the binding problem. How does the brain take all these disparate bits of information, sights, sounds, memories, feelings, bodily sensations, and weave them into a single, unified, seamless conscious experience? It's like the brain is a masterful storyteller. It's constantly taking all the raw data, all the activity in those different networks, and it's creating a coherent narrative, a consistent experience of me. It's interpreting, integrating, and making sense of everything, giving you that feeling of being a single, unified individual. This is what consciousness often feels like, a unified stream of experience. This unified feeling of self, then, isn't something that resides in a single, special neuron or a specific brain region. Instead, it's an emergent property of the entire system. It's the result of countless neurons firing in precise, coordinated patterns across vast networks, integrating information from both inside and outside the body and constantly updating that information. It's the brain's highest level function, its grand symphony, its continuous act of self creation. So, where is your sense of the self located? It's not in one part of the brain, it's nowhere and everywhere. It's not a physical thing you can point to on a map. It's a process. It's a dynamic, ever changing constellation of brain activity distributed across multiple interconnected networks. It's a constant conversation between your brain, your body, and the world around you. It's shaped by your biology, your memories, your experiences, your social interactions, and even your future aspirations. It's messy, it's complex, and it's profoundly humbling to realize that the you feel so intimately is such a grand, distributed, and continuous construction. And that's what makes it so incredibly fascinating. The feeling of being you is perhaps the most incredible trick your brain plays, constantly creating and maintaining this seamless illusion of a unified self, even as it operates as a sprawling, distributed, ever-changing network. There's no single captain, but rather a whole crew, all working together all the time to make you, you.